You are welcome once again to Bio 211 Plant Physiology, Unit 5, Session 1, Transport of Mineral Salts. By the end of this session, students should be able to explain what essential nutrients are to plants, list the major elements required by plants for their life processes, explain the form in which mineral salts interact with root surface and soil solution, describe the mechanisms of mineral salt absorption, describe how ions are moved up the xylem, show evidence of mineral salt uptake through the xylem, and give account of factors that affect the uptake of mineral salts from the soil. Mineral nutrition in plants. Among the many elements that are found on Earth, only 14 or 15 are absolutely required for the life processes in plants. Plants exhibit disease symptoms and ultimately die when such elements are deficient in the soil. Such elements which are absolutely required for the normal growth and development of the plant body are called essential nutrients. Among them, 8 elements are required in large quantities, others in small quantities. The elements required in large quantities are referred to as macronutrients, and those required in small quantities are called micronutrients. Plants also contain elements other than the elements mentioned above, whose deficiency may not cause any disease symptoms or death, and such elements are named as non-essential elements. The macronutrients are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sulfur, magnesium, and iron. The micronutrients are manganese, zinc, boron, copper, molybdenum, and cobalt. Non-essential elements are sodium, aluminium, silicon, chlorine, gallium, etc. Most of the above said elements are found in the salt solution, either in the form of inorganic or organic salts or ions, which may exist in either free state or bound to soil particles. Whenever there is depletion of any free ions from the soil solution, respective ions are released from soil particles into the soil solution to maintain their equilibrium. This is achieved by a process called ion exchange process, which may be due to contact ion exchange mechanism or by carbonic acid ion exchange mechanism. Let us take each mechanism in turn to find out how they bring about ion uptake by the roots. Plant roots are in contact with soil particulates which have colloidal dimensions. Root cells, which are living, secrete hydrogen ions which are positively charged. Such ions can easily displace cations like potassium, sodium ions that are bound to soil particles, and so make them available for the root system to absorb their required ion. Both cations and anions have a tendency to get absorbed on the surfaces of the cell walls and exchange with ions present in the soil solution. This process of exchange between the absorbed ions and ions in solution is known as ion exchange. So there goes the tissue distribution in roots. We have the epidermis in yellow, cortex in green, endodermis or the Casparian strip in brown, pericycle, then the xylem. So we have soil particles, then the root hair cells, how the root takes in minerals is as displayed in the diagram. Carbonic acid ion exchange mechanism. Ion exchange mechanism roots continuously irrespective of day or night and liberate significant quantities of carbon dioxide, which when dissolved in soil water produces carbonic acid. Immediately they ionize into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. The hydrogen ions thus formed are capable of exchanging with any carbon, any bound cations on soil particles and make the bound cations available for the roots. Though the above mechanisms were once proposed as theories, it is now clear that growing roots not only release carbon dioxide but also secrete hydrogen ions. Thus, the roots provide hydrogen ions for both carbonic acid ion and contact ion exchange processes. Similarly, adsorbed anions are also exchanged by anions like OH ions. Mineral elements can be absorbed in the form of molecules or as ions. When a positively charged ion as potassium is absorbed by the cell, either a positively charged ion as hydrogen is displaced from the cell, or a negatively charged ion must accompany it. Similarly, anions can exchange with free hydroxyl ions. Likewise, chlorine and bromine are also exchanged without disturbing the electrical neutrality. Having noted what happens around the roots and soil solution, we move on now. Ions exchanged are absorbed into the root cells. It has become established that two processes are responsible for the uptake of ions by roots. The processes are passive uptake and active uptake or active transport. In passive uptake, ions move by mass flow and diffusion through the apoplast along the concentration gradient between the soil solution and the cell sap. Active uptake, on the hand, involves ions being taken up into the cells against a concentration gradient using energy from respiration. Active uptake of ions is selective and energy dependent. It also involves special molecules of the cell surface membrane called pumps. The pump molecule picks up particular ions and transports them to the other side of the membrane where they are released. The pump molecules are globular proteins that traverse the lipid bilayer. Movement by these pump molecules require reaction with ATP. By this reaction, metabolic energy is supplied to the process. So, this is the second sense by which active uptake is said to be energy dependent. Most membrane pumps are specific to particular molecules or ions, and this is the way selective transport is brought about. If the pump molecule for a particular substance is not present, the substance will not be transported. Passive uptake involving diffusion is non-selective and not dependent on energy from respiration. At the Casparian strip, further movement of ions through the apoplast is prevented. Ions are then moved by diffusion or active transport through the cell surface membranes of endodermal cells into the cytoplasm or vacuolar sac. Thus, the plant monitors and controls which types of ions eventually reach the xylem. Ions can also move through the simplest pathway. The final stage in the movement of mineral salts across the root is the release of ions into the xylem. So, as we've talked about, you have the plasmodesmata, plasma membrane, the epidermis, the cortex, the endodermis, the pericycle, and the xylem. Also have the Casparian strip, and that is how ions are exchanged in the plant. So translocation of mineral salts through the plant. We do hope that you remember the xylem is a system of hollow tubes and that it is a conduit for water movement up the plant. Good. Now, once the ions are released into the xylem, they move by mass flow in the transpiration stream. Are minerals moved along with water in the transpiration stream? Movement of mineral elements in the xylem can be demonstrated by a ringing experiment. In a ringing experiment, the tissues external to the xylem, such as the phloem, is removed from a potted plant. When such experiment is carried out, it is found out that the upward movement of ions is not in the least affected. Analysis of the xylem sap also reveals that although some of the nitrogen travels as inorganic nitrate or ammonium ions, much of it is carried in the organic form of amino acids and related compounds. Similarly, small amounts of phosphorus and sulfur are carried as organic compounds. The growing regions of the plant, such as the apical and lateral meristems, young leaves, developing fruits and flowers, and storage organs, are the destinations to which mineral elements in the form of ions are sent. What factors control the uptake of mineral salts in plants? A number of factors, mostly external, affect the control and uptake of mineral salts by the roots. Among them are soil aeration. In most of the cases, living cells cannot survive without oxygen. As the roots contain a large number of living cells, they require considerable amount of energy for their metabolic activities and growth. So oxygen is absolutely essential for generating energy-rich components by biological oxidative processes. As mineral absorption requires energy, poor soil aeration affects the ability of roots to absorb adequate quantities of minerals. Waterlogged soils or soils with higher content of clay have very little amount of air. Under such conditions, roots are subjected to anaerobic conditions and the absorption of minerals is drastically affected. The inhibition of absorption of minerals due to the effect of respiratory poisons on roots clearly suggests that the absorption of minerals is an energy-dependent process. Temperature. Soil temperature has a significant effect on roots' metabolic activities, and also it affects the mobility of ions in soil solution. If the temperature of the soil is lowered, absorption of minerals will be drastically reduced, but with the increase in temperature, the rate of absorption also increases, but up to a certain limit. Drastic variations in the rate of absorption due to changes in temperature suggests the process is dependent on protein or enzymatic activity. pH of the soil solution. The degree of ionization of minerals and other nutrients depends upon the hydrogen ion concentration of the soil solution. For example, most of the phosphate ions at alkaline pH either exist as bivalent A3PO4 ions or trivalent H3PO4 ions. Such ions are not favored for absorption. On the other hand, neutral pH favors the absorption of monovalent ions. So the soil pH has a significant effect not only on the rate but the kind of ions uptake. This property is also due to its effect on cellular components that are involved in absorption, which further suggests that proteins are involved in the ion uptake. As the protein structure is very sensitive to pH, its function also changes if there is any change in the pH. That is why the maintenance of proper soil pH is very important in agriculture. Too acidic or too alkaline soil is virtually useless for cultivation until and unless the soils are restored in terms of pH. Such soils remain as wastelands. Concentration of soil solution. Generally, the concentration of minerals and its components found in soil solution is far below the levels of the same found in the cell sap. It means that the absorption of ions take place against concentration gradient. The relative concentration of ions found in the cell sap and soil solution gives absorption ratio. Ocean water contains relatively greater amount of salts than that of fresh waters. The land plants which are adapted to grow in freshwater soils die in marine water because the marine water is enriched with greater amount of metal ions. Physiologically thrive for them, but marine plant cells which have been adapted to such waters contain much more ionic contents than found in sea water. Even here, the ions are absorbed against concentration gradient. The rate of absorption of ions vary and depends upon the concentration of the soil solution. Normally, roots absorb greater amount of ions at a greater rate in dilute solutions than in a relatively high concentration solutions. How exactly the solution enhances the rapid uptake is not clear, but it is a fact. Ion-ion interactions. Salt solution consists of a wide variety of ions in different concentration. While roots absorb inorganic nutrients, the ions of one kind present in the solution either facilitate or interfere with the uptake of the other kind of ions. This phenomenon is called ion antagonism. On the other hand, a particular species of or ions enhance the uptake of another kind of ions. Such a phenomenon is referred to as ion facilitated uptake. Epstein has demonstrated that the absorption of potassium and iron is antagonized by the presence of calcium and magnesium bivalent ions. Similarly, calcium chloride has been found to inhibit the uptake of copper ions and save the plant from copper toxicity. On the other hand, sodium chloride has been found to facilitate the uptake of a wide variety of ions. Such type of ion interactions leading to antagonistic or facilitated uptake is explained on the basis of carrier molecules. Different ions have different carriers or transport proteins. Because of the specific binding site, any ion that competes with the other ion for the same site results in ion antagonism. On the contrary, a particular ion binding to carrier molecules facilitates the binding of specific ion and enhance uptake of the said ion. So the balanced inorganic nutrient is very important. Otherwise, roots absorb more of one kind of ions, or the absorption of an essential ion may be prevented by the presence of another kind of ion. So in review, the major elements required by plants and the form in which they are absorbed have been considered. The two principal modes of ion uptake, pathways taken by mineral ions to reach the xylem, and factors that affect the uptake of mineral ions were also